It was exactly 4 years ago this month that the pandemic began, 11 months before the US presidential election, and that pandemic dramatically impacted the administration of that election. Now, like clockwork, 4 years later, 11 months before our next election, Chinese hospital beds are filling up once again, and Republicans in the US are raising alarm while the CDC and the WHO are trying to calm all fears. What's going on? Marco Rubio calling for a shutdown of Chinese travel into America until we figure out why Chinese hospital beds are filling up. The New York Post is reporting that Massachusetts is now the second state with child pneumonia outbreak as questions remain about a virus sweeping China. Is that illness already here in the States? And this time it appears to be impacting children instead of adults. How serious is this? Let's dive into it. Massachusetts has become the second U.S. state to report a large uptick in the number of child pneumonia cases amid a mysterious viral outbreak in China, the New York Post reports. Doctors in the Bay State noticed the rise in cases as Ohio reported enough cases to meet the state's definition of an outbreak, but physicians in Western Massachusetts believe it's mostly RSV, a respiratory virus that kills more than 10,000 Americans each year, mostly young children and the elderly. However, officials do not think it is a new respiratory disease, but rather a large uptick in the number of pneumonia cases normally seen at one time. That is according to the New York Post. NBC is reporting that the CDC is trying to calm all fears in opposition of what Republicans are saying. Yesterday, the CDC spoke with Congress to calm congressmen's fears. It says here, respiratory illness surge in China not due to new virus, CDC director tells Congress. The surge is concentrated in northern China, Dr. Mandy Cohen said, where NBC News has reported hospitals have appeared to be overwhelmed with sick children. The upsurge in respiratory illness in China is not from a new or novel pathogen, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention assured members of Congress on Thursday. She said the uptick can instead be attributed to existing viruses and bacteria, including flu, RSV, and pneumonia, said the new CDC director, Mandy Cohen, who took office in the summer. She's backing up the explanation offered by the Chinese authorities and accepted by the WHO, the same explanation that Marco Rubio is saying we shouldn't listen to. He's saying we can't trust the Chinese and WHO who's in their pocket. We need to use our own instincts and block travel at this time, says Marco Rubio. Now, Marco Rubio came out with a letter to President Biden. It's actually signed by J.D. Vance, Tommy Tuberville, Rick Scott, and Mike Braun. So we got 5 senators signing off on this letter to Biden that was written today. So after the CDC director goes to Congress, tries to calm everyone down, the very next day, Rubio says, I'm not buying it. I'm writing this letter to the president. Before I read that letter, shout out to the sponsor of my coverage, National Gold Group. Gold has soared past $2,000 an ounce. Wars in Israel and Ukraine and rate cuts on the table are fueling gold's meteoric rise. Several major banks are all forecasting sizable rate cuts in an election year. Meanwhile, our national debt is skyrocketing higher. There's a direct correlation to the national debt and price of gold. In 2020, the U.S. debt was $23 trillion and gold was $1,500 an ounce. Now in 2023, we got $33 trillion and gold is over $2,000 an ounce. Donald Trump warned the U.S. dollar no longer being the world standard will be the greatest defeat in 200 years, he said. Why are so many Americans adding physical gold and silver to their portfolio and retirement plans? Learn why. Call America's own precious metals company, the National Gold Group today. Mention my name, Ivory Hecker, and you'll always get best-in-class service from America's conservative precious metals leader. National Gold Group has the IRA fee waiver program on qualifying rollovers. Call 888-617-5927. Get a free investor guide today. National Gold Group is a Consumer Affairs top-rated gold IRA dealer. Call 888-617-5927. All right, so Marco Rubio and 4 other senators wrote this letter today to President Biden saying, quote, in light of an unknown respiratory illness spreading throughout the People's Republic of China, we call on you to immediately restrict travel between the United States and the People's Republic of China. As you know, the Chinese Communist Party has a long history of lying about public health crises. During the pandemic, the CCP's obfuscation of the truth and lack of transparency robbed the United States of vital knowledge about the disease and its origin. On January 31st, 2020, President Trump issued an order to restrict travel from China into the United States to protect the American people and counter the spread of that illness. Many officials and commentators, including you, Biden, criticized his decision as being influenced by xenophobia, but history and common sense show his decision was the right one. At this moment, the world faces another unknown pathogen emanating from China that could spread to other countries, including the United States. China has reported an increase in this mystery illness, which is, it claims to be pneumonia caused by a known pathogen since mid-October. This illness reportedly is a special hazard for children and has overrun hospitals in the north part of the country. The World Health Organization says it is unclear if the disease is due to an overall increase in respiratory infection or several events. If history is any indication, we have cause to be concerned. Rubio goes on to say the WHO has requested that the CCP share detailed information about the mystery illness. However, China has an incentive to lie, just as they did throughout the pandemic from 2019. And any new pathogen could derail its efforts to stimulate its economy. Besides, we should not wait for WHO to take action given its track record of slavish deference to the CCP. We must take the necessary steps to protect the health of Americans and our economy, and that means we should immediately restrict travel between the U.S. and the People's Republic of China until we know more about the dangers posed by this illness. A ban on travel now could save our country from death, lockdowns, mandates, and further outbreaks later. Thank you for the attention to this matter. Signed off, Marco Rubio, JD Vance, Rick Scott, Tommy Tuberville, and Mike Braun. So is this an issue where the WHO and CDC are just downplaying it so that it can grow into something huge that causes another lockdown, which causes more last minute shaping of the election, which we witnessed in 2020, where, last minute rules were made that didn't even go along with the law for administering the election. People are concerned about this, and Republicans are very concerned about this, but oddly, the CDC and WHO are saying this is not a big deal. Now, I wanted to, since the New York Post is saying we got 2 big outbreaks in Massachusetts and Ohio, I wanted to check out the CDC's weekly U.S. influenza surveillance report. This is week 47 of influenza tracking by the CDC. And it says that currently outpatient respiratory illness is at 3.9% for this year. If we compare it to last year, I just pulled up the reports for each year. Week 47, 2022, outpatient respiratory illness was at 7.5% compared to 3.9 right now. So it's dramatically higher, almost double. Last year, influenza was almost double what it is right now in the United States. So if this illness is influenza, which they're calling it influenza-like illness, ILI, in China. That's allegedly what is impacting the kids in the hospitals there. It doesn't seem to be impacting the United States. It's looking dramatically lower than last year. Something interesting happens if you keep going back through the years in the United States. So week 47 of 2021, outpatient respiratory illness was 2.4% compared to 3.9%. So 2 years ago, it was dramatically lower. And that's when, the new C illness was still on the scene. If we go back to 2020, the CDC does not go into detail about what happened there. This is very strange. CDC intricately is archiving each week of influenza, but 2020, they go into this weird blackout. And I'm putting the links down in my description to all these weeks I'm referencing. So the CDC says this page is archived for historical purposes and no longer being updated. They show the link to the original page, and that page is no longer there, which would show the details of how much flu we had in November 47th week, which is the end of November in 2020, which was when the new C illness was raging. But it does say here, clinical labs, the percentage of respiratory specimens testing positive for influenza at clinical laboratories is 0.1% this week. So basically, zilch, basically flu went away. And I'm sure you remember that happening in 2020, where flu just vanished. But why? So we still wonder, why did it vanish? And now, why are they hiding the statistical breakdown of it vanishing from their website? I think that's very strange. If we go back to 2019, the same week 47, end of November, outpatient illness surveillance, 2.9% of patient visits reported through the US outpatient. This percentage is above the national baseline, so of 2.4. So there was a 2.9 percentage of patient visits. So flu was lower in 2019 than it is now. And this was just as the new illness was about to pop onto the scene the following month. And on this page from 2019, linked down below, you can see the chart of influenza positive tests reported to CDC by the U.S. Public Health Laboratories, and where it shows week 40 through 48 of 2019, it's starting to climb, the flu starting to climb, and then going right into December, we have a blackout on information. So December 2019, which is when the pandemic emerged, throughout 2020, when the pandemic was surging, we have no information on how much flu was there. It's just flu vanished, and they have no data on flu anymore for during the pandemic. Many people's symptoms in the pandemic were very similar to flu, but everyone was reported to not have flu. That's not flu anymore. It's a new illness. That's what we were told. I just think it's very strange that this information goes away on this chart from 2019 going into 2020 as well. 2018, if you compare the same weeks to 2018, so 2019, you go up to week 48, you can see the flu climb into the winter months. You look at the same week 48 of 2018. And again, these links are down in my description. From week 48 into week 50, flu absolutely catapults through the month of December into the month of January. Flu is ravaging the nation in this chart from 2018 going into 2019. The same information that just disappears for 2020. I'm saying that January of 2019 was tons of flu. January of 2020 is a flu blackout. There is no more flu. But we have a new illness with very similar symptoms. Anyway, it's all documented on the CDC there. It's just very strange. Links down in description. Now, I just wanted to highlight that as we're comparing what flu is looking like this year. It is higher than 2019, but it is lower than last year, dramatically lower than last year. Flu is. Now, I wanted to highlight what the WHO said. The senators are flying in the face of the WHO as they say we need to shut down travel, because the WHO, it put out an alert about this saying, based on available information, WHO recommends that people in China follow measures to reduce the risk of respiratory illness. They're saying you guys should get the Fauci ouchie in your shoulder once again. They're recommending that. But WHO goes on to say, quote, WHO does not recommend any specific measures for travelers to China. Also, quote, WHO advises against the application of any travel or trade restrictions based on the current information available on this event. So they're straight up saying, do not ban travel. We want people to travel between China and the US, despite hospital beds filling up in China. And we don't have the specific numbers on how many hospital beds are filling up in China right now. We're just getting vague reports about it. It was early in November that China first put out a press alert saying we are getting higher numbers of kids in hospital beds. But we don't have any hard numbers, and WHO has asked China to send those. Marco Rubio is saying, regardless of whatever China sends, we can't trust them because they deceived us last time, and we just can't. We need to be smart this time and try to get ahead of an outbreak. Interesting times. Hopefully this is not a big deal, just like monkeypox. This is what's happening, and the timing is freaking people out because it is exactly 11 months before the next presidential election, which is exactly how the timing of how it all started back in 2019. Let me know your thoughts down in the description. Like, comment, subscribe so you get alerted next time I do a video. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys.